It seems to me after lunch, but the great thing, of course, was to walk to Sankaty Lighthouse, and which really is quite a walk. But that we used to do that very, very often.
I got around on bicycle, and one of my first bicycle rides every year when I arrived on the island was to ride up to Sankaty Lighthouse. And you'd go and you'd knock on the door, and the lighthouse keeper's name was Larson then, and Mr. Larson would greet you. He remembered all of us children, called us all by name, and he'd take us up to the top of the lighthouse and let us sign the guest book, and then you felt you were really on the island for the summer. So that was always the first thing I did when I got here, as fast as I could.
I remember the lighthouse as always was that when Larson was, I think it was Eugene Larson, he was a keeper, and had a big house up there, and we used to climb up the top of the lighthouse, and it was just a fixture in the village of Sconset. They wanted to change the nature of the lighthouse up top, and they looked like a cigarette lighter they changed it to. And we took a dim view of that. And they found, I guess, public sentiment made the Coast Guard change their mind, and they put the old cage up there where it used to be. But we used to play around the lighthouse when we were kids. We used to play in the bluff.
Thurston Green's wife, Marta, was one of my best friends, and she was very into doing yoga. And she would bike through the village, and her house was on the south side of the village. And she would go by and pick up people in the morning. And we would bike up to the lighthouse. And we would get to the lighthouse, and Marta would be on the bluff with her back to the horizon and would lead us all in yoga. You know, from like 7:30 to 8:30 or something, we would do yoga in the morning on the bluff at Sankaty. And this was definitely before any of those fences and things. There was nothing. And the erosion really hadn't started. It wasn't the precipice that you worry about falling off of. But it was a wonderful morning thing to do. And then we would all bike home.
But I can tell you one thing about the lighthouse. I worked for a family on the bluff, and for the Gammons. It was the Wilson family that owned the Mayflower on the bluff. I took care of their children, and oftentimes when the Mrs. Gammon, the woman that I babysat for, was alone, she'd ask me to come and sleep there because she was afraid. Well, I'd go up there to sleep, but I could never sleep because that light would be flashing in the window all night long, and the bugs would be flitting around. So that was my memory of the lighthouse. And of course, we walked up the bluff walk to the lighthouse. It was a fun event.
Well, I used to go up to the lighthouse a lot with Peter Benchley was one, and a group, and we would shoot pool in the house that was there. The Coast Guard guys would let us come in and play pool. So that was a fun thing to do if you didn't have something else going on, is to go up there and have a few games of pool at the lighthouse.
You know, this little lighthouse is the welcome to Sconset. It's always been a welcome to me and to, I'm sure, many, many other people. I love having learned, after having been here for 77 years, that basically the federal government gave $12,000 to Nantucket in 1848 to build this lighthouse, and then they had to buy land, and they bought 10 acres of land in 1849 for $250. They started to build her in 1849 and finished her in 1850, and it cost $10,330, so they made money, actually. And she, I can remember her in 1938 is my really earliest memory of being up here. My best friend and I would ride our bikes up, and Mr. Larson, the lighthouse keeper, would open the door and let us in, and we'd climb right up to the top. And you felt as if you owned the world once you got up there. It was wonderful.
we'd get off the boat and we'd come straight out to Sconset. And the highlight of that trip, as it still is today for a lot of people, is coming out Bean Hill and seeing Sankaty Light in the distance. And just the other day, I made sure that you could still see Sankaty Light from Bean Hill, even though it's 405 feet and 12 feet lower than it was last week.
I would lie in bed and see that light go around. And then they started building some pretty big houses around us, and I ended up not being able to see the light go around coming through my window, but I can still see it on my flagpole. And as it comes around, it goes around the flagpole, and if the moon is coming out and there's the moon streak on the ocean, it goes right around above that moon streak. It's just special. I know that one of the most important things to my family is that when we get here, we always come first up to Sankaty and say hello to her. When we leave, we have to come up and say goodbye. And we leave and hope she'll be here the next year. And of course now she will be, because she's going to be moved back and nothing can take her this time.
You got to return them.